104.9 Coyote Country, time again for Fanboy Friday. And checking in from Dallas, Texas, professional Q&A moderator and speaker, film critic at BigFanboy.com, and the show director at the Dallas Comic Show. Once again, let's give it up this morning for Mr. Mark Walters. Good morning.
Hey, Robert. Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday. How you doing, man?
Doing good. Getting ready for the weekend. A couple of fun things coming up to movie theaters this weekend. So I think people have a lot of choices, a lot of things to choose from as the weekend hits.
All right, so one of the big releases is kind of a faith-based film called I Can Only Imagine. I guess with Easter coming up pretty soon, it might be a good one to, get the church group ready to go see it together. You've seen that one, right? I Can Only Imagine?
Yeah, I got to say, this is one that kind of snuck up on me because I was contacted by the studio, and they said, hey, you want to do some interviews? We're going to have some people coming through town. And I honestly, being completely honest here, I didn't really know much about the movie. I wasn't terribly familiar with the song, but I thought, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And I think that, a lot of people had kind of maybe given this the label of being like a faith-based film. And while you could absolutely say that, I got to say I was a little surprised because this plays very much like kind of a normal inspirational type of movie. It doesn't feel like a religious film. It doesn't really feel like it's trying to preach to you. It's actually kind of a great story, and it revolves around the life of Bart Millard, who wrote the song I Can Only Imagine, and is played quite well in the film by, and oh my God, I hope I don't screw up his name because I really did like this kid. His name is J. Michael Finley, I believe is his name.
Okay.
And a newcomer. This is a guy that, he's done stuff on Broadway. He's been in a lot of plays and whatnot. But this is his first film role, and this guy really knocks it out of the park. He's amazing. He plays Bart Millard in the film, and it's a story about how Bart Millard, grew up in a pretty abusive household. His father was really abusive to him, and he ended up, going off and forming a band, which I know you're familiar with, Mercy Me.
Right, yeah.
And, it became very, very popular. And then he wrote this song, which was kind of his way of sort of dealing with the demons of his past, and the song is called I Can Only Imagine, and it ended up becoming a smash hit and kind of, making him into a superstar. But at the same time, the song was sort of a cathartic way for him to kind of deal with, all the problems of his past, and things that a lot of the hardships he had gone through. So it's a really great kind of inspirational story, and I hope that people don't let, listen, I know there's some people out there that look for that kind of movie fare and whatnot, and that's fine. But I hope people don't let the fact that they think that this is a faith-based film or a religious film, I hope they don't let that sway them away from it, because I got to say, I was very, very pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed this and how much I thought it was effective just as a movie and not necessarily, a faith-based movie or religious movie. Also, Dennis Quaid is in the film, and he is particularly good. He plays Bart's father, who is really kind of a monster in the movie, but does manage to sort of go through, a catharsis on his own. So, yeah, it's a cool flick. So I hope people check it out, give it a chance. And if you've never heard the song before, I don't think that matters. Like I said, I wasn't really familiar with it, and I didn't really know much about it. After seeing it, I can say that I'm quite fascinated with the topic of it now. It's definitely something that I'm looking into more and trying to see what all I missed about that story. But yeah, it's a good flick. Opens up this weekend.
Very good. Okay, I Can Only Imagine. That stars also Trace Adkins, who we play his records on the radio all the time, so that's kind of cool. All right, and of course, the big release this week has got to be Tomb Raider, which we touched on a little bit last week, but you've actually seen it by now, so let's talk all about the brand new Tomb Raider starring Alicia, Vikander?
Yeah, let me, before we get to that, let me back up real quick.
Okay.
You mentioned Trace Adkins, which I apologize. I should have mentioned him.
Oh, okay.
Because he actually, Trace Adkins is also in the film, and he's really, really good. He plays the manager of Mercy Me, who kind of helps them make a name for themselves. But what's really funny about this, and the reason I wanted to make sure I brought it up, was because, I've seen Trace Adkins in other films. I mean, I'm obviously very familiar with his career and whatnot. When they brought the real Bart Millard to Dallas, and we got to do some interviews and whatnot, and I'll be posting that up at BigFanboy.com, we got to meet the real manager of Mercy Me, the guy that Trace Atkins is playing.
Uh-huh.
And what's really kind of funny is that if you meet this guy, they could not possibly have cast better than to cast Trace Atkins.
Really?
Trace Atkins looks, sounds, the same height. I mean, like, he is like the perfect casting choice for this guy. So I will absolutely, I definitely wanted to acknowledge him in the film because I think that they really knocked it out of the park with that casting choice.
All right.
And he's great in the movie, too. So.
All right, but very good. Now let's get into Tomb Raider, rated PG-13, in theaters now, and you've seen it, so what you got there?
Yeah, you got Alicia Vikander. She's kind of hot off of her Oscar win for The Danish Girl. She's becoming kind of the new it name right now. You know, she's appeared in a few different movies. She was in Man from U.N.C.L.E. She was in, of course, Ex Machina that's probably her highest profile film to date so far. But yeah, this is her stepping into the shoes of Lara Croft and, you know, kind of doing a new take on the popular video game franchise. First things first, I mean, in case people can't tell from the trailers, all that stuff that you saw with those Angelina Jolie movies and that Tomb Raider, you can forget all that, because that's not what this is. If anything, this is kind of more of a, sort of almost like a Batman Begins type of origin story, basically showing us how Lara Croft became the Lara Croft that we all know her to be, but showing us the early stages of that. So she's not quite the seasoned Tomb Raider that we all know. And really, honestly, until the end of the film, like the last couple frames of the film, she doesn't really kind of step into those shoes, because all throughout this movie, you know, she's going on this crazy adventure, and she's trying to, you know, find out what happened to her father, who she believes to be dead, and, you know, solve the mystery of this, you know, ancient burial tomb and whatnot. So there are certainly moments in the movie that feel like something out of the Tomb Raider games, you know, probably more of some of those origin stories that they did with the character, and you know, she does go on some pretty wild and exciting, you know, jumps and adventures and whatnot, but it's just not the Tomb Raider movie that I think a lot of people might be expecting. So, you know, I've had some people asking me about it, and I've been trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to say or how I wanted to word it. I didn't think it was a bad movie. I just didn't think it really offered anything new or really anything substantial. You know, she's great. She plays her role very well. She's actually, you know, pretty believable and likable as Lara Croft. Walton Goggins, who I typically love in everything he does, he's really good as the villain in the movie, and, you know, has some pretty fun lines and, you know, some pretty good moments as well. Daniel Wu plays kind of a sidekick for Lara throughout the film, and he's really, really good. Unfortunately, he's just not in it all that much. You know, so, I mean, the cast is pretty good. There's also, for those of you that are fans of, like, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, those movies, Nick Frost has kind of a small part in the film, and he's really, really funny. So, I mean, the movie itself is enjoyable for what it is. It's not bad. It's just not that great. And I think that ultimately it's going to end up being one of those things that people are they're going to feel very meh about it. You know, they're not going to be very excited to talk about it, or I don't know that a lot of people are going to want to go back and watch it a second time around. I think it's just it'll probably have a big, you know, solid opening weekend, and then it'll sort of die off pretty quickly after that. Anyway, so yeah, I wish I could say it was great.
Hey, you know, man, they're not all A's. They're not all winners, right?
Well, you know, it's just the sad thing is we've really yet to get a great video game movie. You know, I mean, we've had so many of these movies that are based on video games, and we've just yet to have one that really kind of blew us away. You know, so I was kind of hoping that maybe this one would sort of breathe some new life into the whole concept of video game films. But instead, it's just kind of, you know, just another video game movie. And, you know, now I will say this. If I want to say one really positive thing about it, or if I want to give it a really nice accolade, the last few seconds of the film, as far as, you know, fan service or giving you a little something to leave you with when you're walking out of the theater, those last few seconds of the film are actually, there's a really fun moment that they leave you with. And so I think that if nothing else, if this movie fails to impress people or if it fails to make people enjoy it for any other reason, those last few seconds should get you. So you got that to look forward to.
Well, there you go. You heard it from Mark Walters, kind of a meh movie with a pretty decent payoff, at least. So that's kind of cool. Now, hey, you mentioned video game movies, and I don't want to keep you too long, but I am not a fan of video game movies at all. Matter of fact, I generally steer clear from them. I'll tell you mine. Mine is Prince of Persia. That's the only video game movie where I was, like, really surprised. I was like, oh, that's not too bad. It's kind of like the video game. I like that Jake Gyllenhaal guy. He's all right. But what would you say is probably the best video game movie you've seen thus far?
Wow, that's a good question. I kind of wish I had thought to do a little bit of research.
Sorry, put you on the spot.
If I had known you were going to ask me that, I absolutely would have put a lot of thought into it. Just off the top of my head, I would say, I'll say this, guilty pleasure, meaning that I don't necessarily think it's a great movie. I just really love it because it was fun when I saw it when it first came out. Uh-huh. I still have a big soft spot for Mortal Kombat, for the first Mortal Kombat movie. Yeah. And I think it's because I was such a big fan of that game that I thought they did a really good job of incorporating all the characters from the game into a film narrative. So I enjoy that film for what it is. I by no means think it's a great movie.
Right.
But I do think it's a fun movie. And then I would also say that the first Resident Evil movie I enjoyed.
Oh, yeah, those are pretty good.
Yeah, now I don't know if I could say that the rest of them were all that great.
Sure.
But I do think that first one, for what it is pretty effective.
Well, now to flip it, what would you say is the absolute worst you've seen?
Oh, man.
I'm going to give you mine. Mine is Silent Hill. I just cannot stand the Silent Hill movie.
Yeah, the Silent Hill movie, I think they kind of, they got the atmospheric stuff right. Mm-hmm. I mean, they did some creepy stuff in there. I think as a horror film, it accomplishes some interesting things. But as a video game adaptation, I don't know that it's really all that good. But yeah, I think Doom was probably my biggest disappointment because that was a game that, everybody was into that game. It was such a huge game. And I'll never forget because my friend Andy Chang actually worked for id Software when that movie came out. And, I was kind of like, by association, I was like, man, I really hope this does well because I want, my friend Andy to have a really cool movie based on a game he worked on. And, yeah, I think everybody that saw that film was just kind of like, oh, what a disappointment.
And I'm going to get some hate for saying this, but I really loathe the Super Mario Brothers movie. I'm sorry. It's so bad. So bad.
Well, it's absolutely not a good movie. I'll say that.
All right, at least we agree on that. Because I offend a lot of people when I say that. Because, that's attached to a lot of people's memories. If you're a certain generation, certain age, then it's just what it is. It's just like it's that good because...
I think it's definitely one of those films that because of when it came out, and depending on what your age is, I think it's safe to say that could be a film that does hold a special place in your heart. Mm-hmm. But I also think it's a movie that once you've had a little bit of distance from it, and you've had time to kind of, be away from it for a while, if you go back and revisit it, I think most people would realize that, this is not a very good film. But if nothing else, Bob Hoskins as Mario was surprisingly inspired casting. So, I mean, we at least we can say that we got a Super Mario Brothers movie that got the casting part right.
I guess so. Well, there you go. Nice little side conversation about video game movies there. Mark, what you got going on BigFanboy.com right now?
I'll tell you, man, that's pretty much it. Like I said, we're going to be posting up some stuff over the weekend about I Can Only Imagine. I've got some interview snippets with Dennis Quaid, and I've got some interview snippets with Bart Millard, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that film. But other than that, we don't really have a whole lot going on right now. It's kind of a slow time of year. We're still waiting on some of the big movies to pop up, which is going to happen soon. But do check out BigFanboy.com. You can see the new trailer for the new Avengers movie. And we'll have some more trailers popping up this week. If you haven't already done so, check out the site because we've got a bunch of clips from Tomb Raider so you can kind of get a taste of what you can expect from the movie. We've got an article up that shows you a bunch of clips from the movie. And, nothing terribly wow factor, but, we'll stay up to date on what's happening.
So once again, let's give it up. Checking in from Dallas, Texas, professional Q&A moderator and speaker, film critic at BigFanboy.com, and the show director at Dallas Comic Show. Once again, let's give it up, Mr. Mark Walters. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Robert.
104.9 Coyote Country. Time again for Fan.